But these implied volatility rankings is a way for you to do quickly look at what the information I just gave you, which is I know that the volatility is at 20%. That's the low end. I also know that on the high end, it's 80%. This implied volatility takes that into it, but it adds a little piece to it, which is how long has this, how many days has it been, below, if we assume like below them, I think they use 50%, that if it's at 50%, that's the average implied volatility. If the numbers go lower than 50, it just means that the options have been at the lower end, versus if it goes higher on the higher end. So let's we'll go through this implied volatility ranking. So low implied volatility tells that the market is not expecting much movement in the underlying for a given period of time, right? So options all expire. They all have a limited life to them. So when you're buying an option, you typically, if you're buying 3 months out, that is your concern, is those 3 months that you're holding that options. If it's a year out, your concern is that full year of holding that options, right? So that implied volatility for that given period of time, you might want to know what that ranking is. So high volatility tells us, low volatility tells us that we've got a quiet market. High volatility tells us that we've got a market that is, we've seen lots of volatility, lots of fluctuation in the marketplace. Now, the implied volatility rank looks at current implied volatility versus historic volatility, right? So when I was mentioned earlier where I'm looking at, I know this is low, this is high, this ranking is looking, it's kind of a twist on looking at that same concept, right? So implied measures where it's at now versus where it's been in the last 12 months. So if you're if the range is 20 to 60%, that's your implied volatility range, and it's currently at 40, like where is that ranking? Is 40 at that 50% mark where it's been at 50% of the time? Or is 40 below that 50% mark? So if the 50% mark is actually 45, so that 45% and 40 is lower than that, then it tells you that, right now implied volatility is lower than the average of the volatility in the last year. So here's another way to look at it. So implied volatility. If I'm looking at the rankings, and my ranking, so I'll start with the beginning. So a low implied volatility tells us the market is not expecting much. High volatility tells us that it, is expecting a lot. Given a range of 20 to 60%, and we're at 40, calculating, and the way that they calculate that is they look at where it's been on the low end and where it's been on the high end. And so they'll use the current implied volatility from the 1-year low, and they're going to look at the current implied volatility against the 1-year high, or it's divided by the high and the low. Let me just, we'll get over here. I actually